Good morning, and thank you for watching Sunday Kickoff, a Week 14 edition. I am your host, Fidel Barraza. Alongside with me, Walter Stringer, Coach Hugh Jackson, Abe Seldowitz, and Sania Blue. How's everyone?
Doing really good.
Great.
Good.
All right, another crazy weekend in the NFL last week, and it looks like we might have another one this week. But first, let's talk about what stood out to you guys from Week 13. Start off with Walter.
For me, I'm going to take it to the top of the NFC right now. The Saints are 10-2, Packers 9-3, and the Rams are 9-4. Now, realistically, I really don't see the Rams catching the Saints, but Packers are a different story. See, the Saints have those Chiefs coming to town in a couple weeks. That right there could be a huge game. That could turn out to be another loss for the Saints. I think this is where that Week 3 loss to Green Bay is really going to come back to bite the Saints. So I got the Packers catching the Saints and getting that number one spot in the NFC.
Coach.
Wow. That was a great one, Walt. I think what stood out to me was the Steelers' inability to run the football. You know, obviously that's been their Achilles heel this year. The last 7 games, they have not ran the ball very well. They've thrown it quite a bit. And they're going to be the team that we're used to seeing, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They got to get back to running the football.
Abe.
Yeah, I'm going with the Giants beating the Seahawks. I expected this to be a really good bounce-back game for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. They'd been struggling offensively the past couple of weeks. I thought with Colt McCoy starting, the Giants offense wouldn't be able to muster much. I thought there's going to be a lot of short fields for the Seahawks. I thought it'd be a pretty solid day, even though the Giants do have a very good defense. But they kind of just shriveled up in shell, showed us that sometimes when they play big-time opponents, they can't really handle it. So it's a major concern for the Seahawks going into the playoffs.
Sania.
Yeah, Coach kind of already talked about mine. I was looking at the Steelers against Washington. They are clearly happy to have James Conner back, considering he's off the COVID-19 list, but they definitely missed him. I mean, the leading rusher was McFarland, and I think he had 15 yards, 15 yards rushing. And this is not the Steelers offense that we've grown to come and know this season. They look tired. You had Chase Young on the other side of the ball, who's relentless throughout this whole game on defense. And they just made Washington look like the better team. And clearly we know on paper and in play the Steelers are. So they just got tired in this game.
Yeah, what stood out to me was the Giants going into Seattle and beating the Seahawks. I mean, I was not expecting that, especially with the backup quarterback in Colt McCoy. And then also the Cleveland Browns dominating the Tennessee Titans last week. The Browns look like they might be for real, and they have a huge game tomorrow night against the Baltimore Ravens. Quick recap of Thursday Night Football, Patriots at Rams. In a rematch of Super Bowl 53, the Rams dominated the Patriots 24-3. Cam Newton was benched towards the end of the game, but Bill Belichick says he is going to be his starter going forward. Let me get your guys' thoughts on that. Do you guys think that Cam should still remain the starter in New England? Sorry, Walt.
I believe so because we don't see anything different from Cam that we haven't seen over the past, 4 or 5 seasons. He's inconsistent throwing the football on a week-to-week basis. And if you run him too much during the early part of the season, which is what Carolina tended to do, it's what Bill done. And we said weeks ago at the beginning of the season, how long can Cam's body hold up? You know, he's not a machine. He used to be a machine, but he's not a machine anymore. So he still gives them the best opportunity week to week to win. Not Stidham, not anyone else. I think Bill just needs to figure out how can they get the ball out of his hands quick.
Coach, so I have 2 questions for you. So
Okay.
real quick on that one, and then also, if you were the coach there, how would you utilize Cam Newton? Like, what do you see that would probably fit his style?
I just think, they're trying to win football games. So the best style that fits him, you got to let him run the football. That's just who he is. I mean, you can't reinvent him. It's too late in his career to do that. He's been inconsistent, as Walt said, throwing the football. So you got to play to his skill set. What I really think happened the other day is they just ran into a really good football team. I mean, they ran into a very focused and good football team in the Rams who were playing at home and said, hey, look here, we got a chance to win this division, and we're going to go freaking win this football game. And so they played better than the Patriots did the other day. The difference in the game were the sacks. The Patriots gave up 6 sacks, and the Rams only gave up 1 sack. That was the difference in the game.
Abe.
Yeah, I personally probably would go ahead and start Jared Stidham. I just think the inconsistencies we've seen from Cam has been way too much for them to win games. I understand he does provide some upside rush running the ball, and it is an effective run game with Damian Harris being really efficient. But I just think, a team like the Patriots can have multiple quarterbacks win. I don't think they're very quarterback dependent. So I think maybe you look to Stidham, see if he can give you more efficiency throwing the ball. If he can, if that makes up for the lost rushing yards that you're not getting with Stidham, which you are getting with Cam, then I would say that you should go with him because remember the Patriots, they can take a lot of quarterbacks and win. So I wouldn't be hesitant to start Stidham.
Sania.
Yeah, actually, I agree to that point. I don't think the Patriots right now are a quarterback-heavy team because they don't have a complete relationship. They don't have a bond in which they've formulated. A system that they've been able to get their feet wet and really set into, especially with this new change. We don't have Tom Brady as a quarterback. That's a completely different team. So you're dealing with Cam. You're trying to figure out, okay, how to fit him in, how to work him into the schedule. But you're also trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to make sure these offensive sequences are much better and work for us in the way where now you have teams who are looking at the complete holes that are in this offense, and there are too many. And so I would say, you could toss it up, but it just depends on what scheme you're going to go for. If you're going to go for that run, keep Cam.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think they got to stick with Cam. I mean, Jarrett Stidham hasn't really shown much either. And look, they're not going to make the playoffs anyways, right? So let's use the rest of the remainder of the season, kind of evaluate, like, hey, are you guys going to want to go forward with Cam, or if you guys want to go in a different direction? So that's what I would do. All right, let's check in with Sania Blue. Go ahead.
One quick thing though. Do you think that maybe there's some reason or some reasons or a reason why Bill hasn't already went to Stidham?
Well, I mean, he sees him every day in practice, so he's got to see something that he doesn't like in him, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I would figure it out. And think about it. How long did they wait to sign Cam? So maybe Bill was giving him more reps or more time to maybe, let's see what he has. But it was kind of, if I believe it was late August, right, when they signed Cam. So he must have seen something in Jarrett Stidham that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I agree with Fidel for sure. I mean, if he waited that long to sign a quarterback, then he obviously gave Stidham plenty of time. He didn't do much with the opportunity. I think that also remember Cam Newton signed a 1-year deal. So if you bench him, you're not seeing any more of him long term. You're not seeing if we could adjust the offense in the future and future years to see if you can kind of work something out with Cam. So if you start him now, that does provide the upside of you know what you get. Stidham's under contract. Cam's only got 1 year on his deal, a couple games left. So they got to see what they got. But I would, in terms of our coaching perspective, wins and losses, I think starting Stidham would be smart. But in terms of the long term, seeing what you have in Cam, I go Cam.
Believe this is the first year they won't have double-digit wins in a long time. I want to say 10 years. Last time, I think Matt Castle took over. Yeah, so we'll see what the Patriots do moving forward with the quarterback situation. All right, let's check in with Sania Blue with our injuries and coronavirus update.
Yes, guys, you already know I try to keep you as up-to-date as possible with all the different things that happen with this injury list, but also this injury update is brought to you by Lambs of God Designs, rocking them right now. So make sure you use that promo code EastWest to get 10% off your order. Now let's get into it. So for COVID and the coronavirus, we know, of course, it's impacted the season, but one particular instance that I brought up in my Wednesday update that I'm also going to bring here is the Dez Bryant situation. So yes, Dez Bryant tested positive for COVID-19, and yes, he is out for this week. But also, the NFL claims that they followed protocols with Dez Bryant's situation. And if for people who don't know or who are still not in the know of the time frame in which he was tested positive and he was out in the field. So he was out on the field 30 minutes before kickoff between the Ravens and the Cowboys game. And, the NFL's chief medical officer, that's Dr. Alan Sills, he said that the Ravens did everything that they needed to do, especially with their contact tracing protocols, and that ultimately they followed what they're supposed to do. Now, we could get back into, I would like to, for us to talk, because we have talked about COVID-19 and the impact of it in the players and the teams, the coaches. So this is a question that I guess I would bring back up after, I give you guys the injury update on what you think in terms of how it went about, because Dez Bryant was on the sidelines hugging people, talking to a variety of staff and players. So like I said, and if anybody would like to slide up in the comments, that would also be great as well. But all right, now for your injuries, Kenyon Drake for the Arizona Cardinals, he is questionable. That's that hip that's bothering him that he hurt against the Giants. And also Jonathan Joseph, the cornerback for Arizona, he's officially on injury reserve. DeAndre Hopkins is questionable. He's expected to start, but just letting you guys know he's questionable with the neck injury. Now on to the Falcons, their offensive tackle, Caleb McGarry, he is out. That's for personal reasons, but also Ricardo Allen, the safety, he has a concussion injury, so there's an out for him. Julio Jones also out with that hamstring. And for the now for the Bills, you got Jaquan Johnson. He's out on his ankle injury. He was officially ruled out for this game, same as John Brown, who is the wide receiver. He's on injury reserve now with his ankle injury. And for Christian McCaffrey and the Panthers, he's ruled as doubtful. That thigh, that shoulder are still not completely the best to play against the Broncos this week. And let's go to the Bears. The Bears. So, Khalil Mack is questionable. This time it's his shoulder. Usually it's been his back for the past few weeks throughout the season anyway. We also don't have that linebacker in James Botters, so he's out with his knee. He's been sidelined as well. Also, the Bears had a bit of a COVID situation, considering that earlier this week they did have to close down facilities, but then with the way that they follow their protocols, they opened facilities back up. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if something comes out later next week in terms of making sure that they don't have any positive COVID cases. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now for the Bengals, T. Higgins, that star rookie wide receiver, he is questionable. He's still expected to play, but I wouldn't be surprised if he may not be opening, the game, or you may see him later in whether it be the second quarter or the second half. That's a hamstring injury that's been bothering him. Same thing for Mackenzie Alexander. He's questionable, but that with his knee. And Jonah Williams, that offensive tackle, has now been placed on injury reserve with his knee injury. Joe Mixon's still out on injury reserve. He won't practice this week. That being with his foot. Now for the Cleveland Browns, Denzel Ward, the cornerback, he is out, ruled out with his calf injury. And guard Wyatt Teller is also out. He was activated from the COVID-19 list, but again, still missing this game. And Austin Hooper, their tight end, is questionable. He has a neck injury, not necessarily serious, but he is questionable. Ezekiel Elliott for the Dallas Cowboys, also questionable. His calf injury has been giving him a little bit of a hard time, but we're expected to see him. So just for people to keep in mind, these questionables right now are really a game time decision call. So until that official report is out, that usually happens right before the game, these are still ruled as questionable. Now, Anthony Brown in the cornerback, he's ruled out for his rib injury. And same for Donovan Wilson, but for his groin and for a groin injury. Now for the Broncos, Trey Marshall, that safety, he is ruled out. He was officially ruled out yesterday because of a shin injury. And that's a major one for the Broncos. Now, DeAndre Swift for the Lions, he has an illness. It's questionable.
Man.
He's questionable. He's real questionable yesterday. Matthew Stafford also ruled questionable because he has for a thumb injury. So Jeff Okudah, he's also out. He'll be undergoing his season-ending groin injury next week. And for the Packers, Darnell Savage, questionable, groin. So we see a trend here between groin injuries, between concussions. We talked about it a little bit before the show, guys. We already know concussions and injuries right now are going to be pretty serious in terms of how teams are impacting, because we already know health has been a real concern throughout this season.
Yeah.
And let's go for the Houston Texans. So their cornerback in John Reed, he is out, officially out, ruled out with a neck injury. And same for Phillip Gaines. He is ruled out as well. So they're going to need some help in that cornerback position. Gaines with a knee and shoulder injury. And for the Colts, a definite out for them is the Raven Clark, who we know was placed on injury reserve for that Achilles. And let's see. Let's go to the Jags. Sidney Jones, cornerback, questionable, Achilles. And let me see. Let me get your Raiders in here, Fidel. So Jonathan Abram is expected to be available, but the safety is questionable. Josh Jacobs, again, expected to be available, but that ankle is something that is bothering him. So he was put as questionable. And Jeff Heath is on injury reserve for his concussion. Now for the Chargers, they're losing a offensive tackle, losing a guard. They're going to need some help to keep that on offense this week. And for the Rams, Terrell Lewis, the linebacker, he's out. That's the coach's decision in terms of after what happened on Thursday's matchup. And Miami Dolphins, they're not going to have their running back in Myles Gaskin. He was already ruled out for Sunday's game after testing positive for COVID. So we'll have to see with that. I would say maybe one of the healthier teams right now. Can I even give you a healthier team right now, guys? To be honest, I'm so sorry.
It's towards the end of the year. Like everyone's like, the injury bugs is everywhere.
The injury bugs now literally everywhere. When I'm looking at this injury update, it's all over the board for everybody who's having whether at least one person on injury reserve within this week or a definite out. And even for Pittsburgh, they're going to need help on defense with Robert Spillane being on injury reserve for his knee injury. So, guys, just to keep it short and contained, concussions, knees, groin injuries are all serious injuries that we're having to combat this time this season. So that's your injury update, your COVID-19 update. But if we want to dive into that question I brought up at the beginning of my segment, then I would definitely like to get into that too.
Yeah, it was just kind of an awkward situation. We saw him before the game. He was kind of, throwing up the X and whatnot, giving hugs in it. And then they say, hey, like, we need to test you again. So I guess it came back positive. But then I read a report saying that he came back negative after they tested him the third time. But he has been placed on the COVID-19 list. Mm-hmm. Not too sure what's going on. I mean, not a good look for the NFL that they kept the game going, right? I mean, because if a player tested positive and he was around other people, then he's going to give that bug to everyone. Walter, what did you think of that whole situation?
Yeah, I think it was careless. I think it's time for everybody on all levels to start taking the situation seriously. We had a young man for the University of Florida yesterday collapse on the court. And then when reports come out that that young man tested positive, was it a few weeks ago? And to know that it can cause heart issues and to see that happen and to see the reaction of it, it shouldn't take someone to lose their life for people to realize the money comes behind everything else. If you're worried about publicity, you for surely do not want anyone dying on camera at your arena or your stadium. So it's time to start taking it serious. Shut things down, get things under control.
Coach.
Well, obviously, we had this conversation a couple weeks ago, and I've stood on the table for it. I think it's really concerning. I don't think anybody really knows how these players are going to unfold after they have COVID. And just like Walter just mentioned, a basketball player who had it a while back, and then here he is collapsing. Who's going to collapse in a National Football League game in order for us to say, okay, enough, let's slow this thing down, let's figure out better ways to be safer, to put everybody in the best position they can be for their futures. Because what happens if half of the National Football League walks in, gets ready for next season, they can't play because of COVID? That's going to be an issue.
Yeah. Abe.
I think you're muted, Abe.
Abe, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think there's this general idea with athletes that they might be Superman or nothing can phase them or anything that they encounter, they're just going to get past it because they've done their whole lives. They've been elite athletes. But we're really seeing even a young man like the University of Florida player, he can be affected by the health effects. He can pass it on to someone that's going to be affected by it. So, thinking that these guys are just young and they're ball players, so nothing's really going to happen is a very selfish and kind of one-dimensional way to look at it. I think, there's got to be a worldwide perspective, a global perspective. And these guys have got to be setting the example because with the Broncos, if we have three quarterbacks in the same quarterback room, even taking their mask off for 30 minutes, that's enough time to pass the virus. So those 30 minutes, they could have worn it, 24 hours straight before that. But if they're not doing it for those 3 hours, that's enough time for the virus to pass. So,
Sania.
Definitely. And Keontae Johnson, I believe that was the player's name. I actually went to watch some of the reaction from his teammates. They were so distraught seeing that, witnessing that. So imagine what this does to team chemistry, the bond, because not only are you're playing a game naturally, we know the entertainment aspect, the money aspect, but there are still people at the end of the day. These are real people and real stories. You have somebody, your brother, who's out there who just collapsed. And also for people who don't know, he was stable, but in critical condition.
Yeah.
Was his reported condition after his collapse when he was rushed to the hospital. So when we translate this to the NFL and we translate this to situations like Des Bryant being on the side of the field, don't get me wrong, I'm not, pointing fingers specifically at Des Bryant because he didn't even know until the report was given to him. But at the end of the day, the NFL can't keep acting with sticking their chest all out saying, yeah, we're fining and we're doing all this. But at the end of the day, you still have this situation. And we know that the NFL at the time could not afford to push back another game. We already have a game on Wednesday. We already have games on Tuesday. The season can't afford it. And the fact that they can't afford it for money reasons, but they can afford it for players' health is a big concern.
I mean, I guess my question is, who is it that's getting the, testing the players? Is it someone from the team or is it a doctor? Or because if you're a doctor and you got a result back and it says inconclusive or whatever it said it was, you can't let that player go on the field. Now we got to keep an eye out to see if any Ravens, if there's more spread of the virus, and now the Dallas Cowboys, because I believe it was hugging Cowboys coaches or players, one or the other. So definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, guys, let's talk about the AFC South and one of the most competitive divisions in the NFL. It's down to a two-team race. Tennessee and Indianapolis. They're standing both at 8-4, but Tennessee currently has the tiebreaker over the Colts. Walter, who do you see winning this division, the Colts or the Titans?
I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think in the long run, Tennessee has their own issues. I just think they're healthier right now, but they have their own issues. They finished with 3 of the final 4 games on the road. But I just believe that when it comes in the long run, Mike Vrabel is going to stay more true to who his team is than Frank Wright will be able to. And the Colts just have too many issues. At this point in time of the season, this is the time to have all the issues. They got Vegas today. They got Houston next week. And then in 2 weeks, they have a huge game at Pittsburgh, which is going to be huge for both teams because the Steelers, of course, lost last week to Washington. And then they've got other issues coming up. But they got Buffalo tonight. That could not intentionally, but that game against Buffalo tonight could turn into another loss to the Steelers. So Pittsburgh's going to be revved up to go in 2 weeks. They're going to have a lot to play for. The Colts are going to have a lot to play for. And I just think the Colts have too much going on right now. I think they're going to fall down the stretch.
Coach.
Well, when I look at what's left, and I think Walter kind of said it, Tennessee is going to be on the road for 3 games at Jacksonville, Green Bay, and Houston. And so when you look at the Colts, they're going to have 2 road games and 2 games at home. They'll play the Raiders, obviously, away. They got Pittsburgh away, which Walter just mentioned. It's going to be a big game, but they got Jacksonville at home and Houston at home. I think the Colts have the best chance because of the schedule. I think that's what's going to be important, keeping your team healthy, keeping your team close to home, everything with the coronavirus that's going on. How can you get a team focused here at the end? This is the last quarter of the season. This is the playoff push, and they got a chance to win this division. So they're going to let go of every distraction, fire everything into these last 4 games. And I just think because they're going to be home, one more opportunity for them, I think they're going to have the upper hand.
Abe.
Yeah, I'm going with the Titans. I got to agree with Walt. I think the only really concerning game is the Packers game. They have the Jaguars, the Lions, and the Texans as the other 3 teams. Look at the Colts schedule. They got the Raiders and the Steelers, those are 2 tough games. Also, with the Titans having the tiebreaker, they've got the advantage. And I also think it's going to be a favor to the league because if the Titans win, I think they'll be slightly a better team in the playoffs. I think the Colts defense is better, but I think the Titans with their receivers, the emergence of Corey Davis, the step forward that A.J. Brown has taken. Last year is basically Derrick Henry. And now you add A.J. Brown getting even better, taking that step. Corey Davis getting into the picture. And, he's the 5th pick in the draft, so it was a great story for him. So I think come playoff time, they'll be a slightly better team. But I do think the Titans will win it.
Sania.
Look, I think the Titans should walk away with an easy win today, so that's definitely going to help their record against the Jaguars. I would say that the Titans, if they lose this game, they're basically handing it over with a cherry on top and saying, here you go. But I think that they should be the division winners. I think they are the better team. But with that said, they have shown a little bit of inconsistency with teams that they should beat. They should be able to beat it without a problem, especially on offense. But some teams have been giving, Derrick Henry, we already know he's a grown man. He's a monster on that field.
Yeah.
But Tannehill has just had a little bit of inconsistency, especially with his throwing and his completion. So I would say, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say the Colts win the division, but I think Tennessee should be winning the division.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to quarterback play, and I just trust Ryan Tannehill more than I trust Phillip Rivers. So, plus Derrick Henry, he's a monster. He can, one game rush for over 100 yards easily. They should win this game today against Jacksonville, but we saw a couple of weeks back them lose to the Cincinnati Bengals. So let's not, give Tennessee the division yet, but I think they should win, and I'm just going to base that off quarterback play. I just trust Ryan Tannehill more.
This offense. I'm sorry, Walt.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, also this offense and the schedule, because Coach brought up the schedule. The schedule is in favor for the Titans to take this division right now. I think so, because you don't have. Like Abe brought up, their biggest contender in these next few weeks is Green Bay. So if you can't walk away with that, or if you can't, even if you gave Green Bay a real true scare. But true. SK brought it up in terms of that defense and the offense for the Colts. The Titans should walk away. If they don't win this division, it's because they gave it up.
Yeah, I actually believe the Colts have been the more consistent team. They've been the more consistent 8-4 team this season. I just think the Tennessee is healthy, but yeah, like you said, they should win the division. But the Titans have had some bad losses. It's like when the Titans lose, they lose bad. They lose ugly. And it makes you wonder, okay, on a week-to-week basis, are you this team or are you this ugly team that loses ugly to ugly teams? So it comes across because Tennessee, they're so still dependent on Derrick Henry. I think their recipe to win isn't Tannehill throwing for 380 and 3 touchdowns. It's consistent feeding of Derrick Henry. They need Derrick Henry to eclipse 100 yards every game. They need ball control because that defense is still awful. And I still believe that defense is going to be what eventually unravels them in the long run.
Yeah, the Colts have a big game against the Raiders today, and I'll be keeping a close eye on that one for sure. All right, guys, now it's time for our This Week in Fantasy Football Advice with Abe, presented by Thrive Fantasy App, the best way to play daily fantasy. All right, Abe, floor is yours. What should we do? Fantasy football playoffs. Give us some advice.
Yeah, so I'm starting Corey Davis. He's quietly having a really good season behind A.J. Brown. The Jaguars will be out at least 3 of their top 5 corners this Sunday when they play. Sidney Jones is that 4th guy, so if he's not able to go, he's questionable with that Achilles, as Samir mentioned. If he's not able to go, they're out 4 of the top 5 corners. That's a recipe for the disaster. Corey Davis has been, as I said, took a really nice step. He's had about 16 points a game on the season, so a pretty nice situation there, especially with such a vulnerable Jags defense. In terms of who I'm sitting, Devontae Parker. So the Chiefs are the 2nd worst matchup in the league for the receivers. I got the news that Myles Gaskin was going to be out with the coronavirus. That's a big concern because if he's not able to run the ball for them, kind of keep them balanced with the offense, and I think they're going to struggle moving the ball. I think asking that offense to kind of keep up with the Chiefs is going to be a lot. The pass rush will be able to get home. I think the biggest help they could have had is having a guy like Gaskin, even for a guy like Parker, to help the offense move the ball, kind of keep them honest. If you let the Chiefs tee off, which they can do, they're very good against the pass. They know what they got to do. They know they're going to score a lot, so they know they have to tee off against the pass. I think if you let them tee off without a Gaskin in there to run the ball, it's a big concern. So I would definitely say Parker.
All right, sir. Thank you for the advice. All right, now it's time for our bold predictions for Week 14. Start off with Walter. What is your bold prediction for today?
I have tonight the Buffalo Bills will hand the Pittsburgh Steelers their 2nd straight loss.
Ooh. All right, Coach.
Bold enough?
That's fair.
I'm with it.
That's spicy enough for you?
That is hot. That is hot with extra mustard.
What's the essay?
Mine is going to be the Dallas Cowboys beat the Cincinnati Bengals.
All right.
Oh,
That's kind of bold. Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be. They
Yeah.
are the
They gotta
dream. They have to, and they're not very good.
they're still in the divisional race too, right? So
Yeah, they
Yeah.
is.
all right, Abe.
Yeah, I think the Giants are going to go ahead and continue their defensive momentum. I don't necessarily think they'll win because I think they have limitations on offense. However, I think we're going to see that defense continuing to improve. James Bradbury, I think, is going to have a decent game against DeAndre Hopkins. Usually there's no such thing as shutting down a guy like Hopkins, but if you can slow him down, you've done well. I think that's kind of been the theme with the Giants. If you can just slow the opposing offense down, then you've done your job. So I think the momentum continues against the Cardinals this week. I think in the long term, the Giants are a very interesting team. They can get Barkley back to form, maybe get a little improvement from Jones. That defense is a really nice piece. So the Giants looking going into next year, I think, are a really interesting team.
Sania.
All right. I'm just taking big bets since we talked about it yesterday on our Saturday show. I'm going to take some big bets. And I said the Vikings beat the Buccaneers by at least a field goal.
Big time prediction.
That's a big time prediction. Again, just throwing logic out the wind. Big bets. You got to bet big.
That's right. All right, and I'm gonna go with the Steelers over the Bills. Everyone's kind of been trashing on the Steelers all week. I think Mike Tomlin's gonna have those guys ready to go, and they'll get the win in Buffalo.
They're going to be determined to show they weren't a fraud.
Man, they're not a fraud. I think they have clearly shown that they're not a fraud throughout this season. And Mike Tomlin, he said one thing about him: I'm not a fraud either. So
Yeah.
he already said that team walked in there and gave that win away.
Well, maybe this.
But the key to this will be, and I think everybody's saying it is, Pittsburgh in the history of teams that have started 11-0. There's only been 4 teams that has been able to keep it going. Most teams, they lose 2 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
That has been the history of it. So you start 11-0, you normally lose 2 games in a row in 25 years in the history of the National Football League. So here it is. And the other guy, when we're talking about, what stood out last week, Josh Allen is a player.
Yeah.
He is the real
really.
deal. So, and they're playing in Buffalo. So look out.
And to that point, Coach Jackson, back in the 2018 draft, everyone said he was by far the most inaccurate. He was the least pro ready. But this year, he's having by far the best season. I mean, Lamar obviously had an amazing season last year at the MVP year. But this year, there's no doubt that from that 2018 class, Josh Allen played the best.
He's a player.
Yes, he is. All right, lock to win, Walter.
I got the Bucks over the Vikings. I think the Bucks are rested. They're healthy, their version of healthy, and I think they dump one on the Saints today. Not the Saints. They really get the Vikings today. Big.
Coach.
Mine is going to be, you guys ready for this one?
I'm ready.
The Baltimore Ravens, with their back against the wall, is going to defeat the Cleveland Browns on Monday night. Because if not, they're done.
All right. Abe.
Yeah, I'm going Saints over Eagles. Most people would say it's kind of obvious, but I think the Saints, they're looking at seeding. This is not a time to let up. It's not a time to let Jalen Hurts kind of, spark the offense. I think they're too veteran of the team. I think they're going to be really focused. Remember, when you don't have your starting quarterback in Drew Brees, sometimes you can be vulnerable, but I think the Saints are too good coached. I think the organization is too good. They're locked to win against the Eagles.
Yeah, that Saints defense is outstanding.
The defensive line, yep.
Sania.
I'm going to say KC goes into Miami and has a warm day, a warm, sunny win. And that you will not hear me talk about Green Bay and a happy life much here. But I would say that the Packers are wiping out the Lions.
And I got the Titans over the Jags. All right. Coach Hugh Jackson, who is your advice going out to this week?
My advice goes out to one of my colleagues and a good man and an unbelievable coach, Mike Tomlin. Get back to playing Pittsburgh football. they run the football and play great defense and they're opportunistic throwing the football, that's how they win. I understand all this beauty and they got some good young receivers, but they need to become more physical, more intentional about dominating the game. And that's who the Pittsburgh Steelers are. That's how they're going to get back to winning and become more consistent. They have to put their hand in the dirt and line up and run the football.
All right. And this live stream was presented by Grand Lighthouse Coffee. Make sure you go to grandlightthousecoffee.com. Use promo code EastWest to get 10% off your order. And Grand Leyenda Tequila. For more information, go to grandleyendatequila.com, the official tequila of the East West Football Network. All right, everyone. Thank you, everyone out there, for watching. Enjoy the games and stay safe.
I have a question real quick.
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
Coach, what advice would you give to Ocho Cinco when he calls you at 1 o'clock in the morning saying he's in?
Get off my phone.
All right. I just wanted to make sure Cinco got it.
All right. On that note, thank you, everyone out there, for watching. Enjoy the games and stay safe.
Peace.